LA, right? So a lot of women, a lot of girls, 18, 19 years old, came to LA to act. And
Okay.
then they didn't get their job. They didn't go how they thought. And they started working in clubs, or they started doing porn, or they started doing something else. And their family's really concerned. And then here's this group of Christians that are going into the places that Christians don't go into. And we're really the only resource. We're the
Wow.
only phone call.
Welcome to the Christ and Coffee podcast, where our mission is simple. We want to unite Christians one conversation at a time. My name is Dr. Haig, and today we have the multi-talented Emily Hilbard joining the program. Emily is a councilwoman in Orange County. She has her own recording studio and is involved with many different types of nonprofits. She even wrote a book on helping others on how to start nonprofits. But in this conversation, though, we're going to focus on her ministry where she helps women leave the sex industry. Emily talks about her journey and how she ended up in this ministry in the first place. She talks about her friendship and ministry partner, Chrissy Outlaw, who was a former porn star, and how the two of them joined forces to help many women find Jesus Christ and leave the sex industry altogether. But before we start our conversation, if you could do me a favor, if you could hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment, or share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, it will help us promote this podcast, where again, our mission is to unite Christians one conversation at a time. With that said, please grab a cup of coffee and enjoy this episode. Hey, Emily, welcome to the Christ and Coffee podcast. So
Thanks for
good.
having me.
Of course, of course. So very important question off the bat. How do you drink your coffee?
Good question. I mix it up.
So you're not like, I have my only
No,
drink every
no, I
day.
never have more than, you hear that, okay, I like it like this and like this, extra this. No, that's not me. That's not me. I'll do a little creamer,
Okay.
but when I run out of creamer, I'll do black coffee for a week or so. And then when I feel like going to get more, I'll go get it. So I like to switch it up.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I think it's good to, diversify the palate and just not stick to a certain routine. That's great. Any coffee of choice lately or just
No, I'm the kind of coffee drinker that when I go to the grocery store, I look and I'll buy it based on the packaging.
okay.
I'll
Great.
just switch it up. Every time I go, I try something new.
All right. That's good. That's great.
Not much of a stickler.
Wonderful. So tell me about your upbringing. What was your religious upbringing like?
Yeah, so I grew up in East LA suburb called Downey,
Okay.
and the nickname for that little town now is the Mexican Beverly Hills. So like many of the residents there, a lot of our family had come from Mexico. So they kind of ended up in that area. I had a great childhood, wonderful childhood, lots of diversity in that part of town, and I had the ideal childhood. My parents still to this day are married. Like that is kind of the family, the culture that was in that area. I was an athlete, so I played everything, soccer, baseball that you could imagine. Ended up going on to play volleyball in college. So I was always just the athlete. That was what I always did. Went to Christian school in Downey as well. And really, it had the ideal childhood, an ideal childhood.
That's great. I feel like people need to celebrate that a bit more. If your parents are together, if they just showed enough love for you to just, thrive, it's like, yeah, I'm proud of that. And I want to make sure that continues, versus like, I feel like sometimes we like idealize, the drama of a broken upbringing and whatnot, but just to have that and not be grateful for it, I feel like needs to just be talked about a bit more.
I didn't realize how rare it was until later. We'll get into it in a little bit. But growing up, I had no clue. I mean, I could remember my dad telling me, "Em, you are just as pretty, smart, and capable as everyone else. Be on your best behavior. Protect yourself at all times. And never be afraid to throw the first punch."
That's great.
At school, you're not supposed to hit. But he if we needed to. But, I mean, he was really, my dad was there, like traditional provider protector. My mom was there making sure that we were taken care of. And she was at all of our games, took us to school. Well supported. If I fail at life, it is my own fault.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. So how was playing volleyball in college and being a student athlete? What was that like?
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was way more time than I ever imagined. Playing volleyball in college took about 40 hours a week, not to mention 16, 18 units a semester. It was full time. It was a job. It was a job. And that's what you're there for. When you're a collegiate athlete, you're on scholarship, they're paying for you to perform. that's it. But I loved it. We got to travel, went to Hawaii, went to the Midwest, and doing what I love. So it was a great time. It was a really great time.
Excellent. And what was your home a Christian home growing up?
My mom got saved in the hippie movement
Okay.
in Southern California during the 60s and the 70s. The movie that came out, Jesus Revolution, that was my parents. That was a lot of their friends. And so growing up for me, my parents still to this day keep in touch with a lot of their friends from high school. They were all hippies back then. They were all, running wild.
Mm-hmm.
And then this Jesus movement sweeps across Southern California. My mom gets saved and a lot of her friends get saved. And that was the culture that I grew up in, was a lot of Christians who had barely just gotten saved. And I'm a little kid, and together we're learning together. I can remember being a kid and thinking, you're an adult, you're a grown up. You don't know this.
Mm-hmm.
It was sweet. It was very pure. It wasn't a judgmental thing, but it did catch my attention even at a young age. We're doing this together.
That's great. So you're learning with your parents as they're learning and experiencing the Bible and scriptural truths, and that's great. And I think there's always something when people are born outside of the church, when they experience the church properly, there's this greater appreciation for the truths of Scripture and just the transformative power and presence there is in God, in Christ. That's amazing. So you grew up in a Christian home. You grew up in a loving family. You did the whole student athlete thing. And then you find yourself doing a ministry in a location that probably is not what you would normally think of.
Right. So I went to Azusa Pacific, which is a Christian university here in Southern California. And after I graduate college, some friends and I, they're like, hey, let's go on this backpacking trip, right? We worked for a year or so, save up. I think we maybe had like $2,500, maybe $3,000, and we're going to go on this trip, right? So we're backpacking, and at this part of the trip, we're in Southeast Asia. So Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, that part of town. And we bumped into things that I had never heard of before. Growing up in the family that I grew up in, very protective, kids weren't around bad things. And my friend and I witnessed child sex trafficking. And it's so out in the open there. The value of life is missing. I would hear men with my accent, my American accent, sitting at cafes talking to other men about what they just did in great detail out in public. And I remember freezing because I knew that was wrong. I had never heard that before, and we're out in public, so I think it's extra wrong. This is before iPhones, right? So internet cafes, you go, get on your AOL and message mom and dad, okay, I'm good, everything's good. And on the desktops of the computers in those internet cafes were pictures of boys and girls that we might call them glamour shots. The girls had way too much makeup. The boys looked a little effeminate, just something wasn't right. Wow. And after spending some time there, realizing, these are the kids that they have here. Those are the ones. And that left a mark. And being from LA, I don't live Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. I live in LA. So I promised the Lord that when I came back, I would never forget those kids. And that led to a lot of what I'm doing today. I started going to church in Hollywood, and I met a friend of mine who was a stripper, and she was at that club by the LAX airport. It's torn down now. It's a parking lot. But she had met a friend in a ballet, I think it was a ballet class, invited her to church. And she said, I'm pretty, I don't really know much about church, but I'm pretty sure strippers aren't allowed in church. And this girl said, my church is different. Come on down. And so I ended up meeting her, and Glamour article picked up her story, and we were church ministry, right? That little church, and just got green lit. And so we started going to different strip clubs around LA County, and Glamour magazine thought that was cool and different, so did an article on us. And we started getting phone calls from all around the country. Hey, do you know my daughter? Her name's such and such. She went out to LA 6 months ago to act, and we know she's doing something like that.
Wow.
Here's a picture. When you're getting calls from parents around the country, do you know my daughter? Do you know where she is? I had no idea what I was getting into at the time.
Wow. So just to recap, you have this conviction seeing child trafficking in Asia. Come back, it's not like you just kind of say it out loud to God. God, this is wrong. I don't want to tolerate this. Help me think about those kids overseas, but let me just be aware of what's happening here. You end up meeting a former stripper, or she was
Mhm.
and then did she come to faith, or
When she first started coming to church, she was doing both. She was working it out. The Lord was really changing her heart.
so that's a good lesson there
Yeah.
too. Sometimes churches feel like you have to have it all together or live a perfect life
Mhm.
before you can walk in, versus the reality is
Yeah.
slowly, maybe changing your mindset as you're getting fed the truth.
Absolutely. The Lord will change you on the inside. Lord changes all of us on the outside. But if we have people on the outside saying, hey, change the way you dress, change your hair, all this external stuff, we're teaching behavior modification versus the Lord's got that person. Let me come alongside them and be a support and let the Lord do what he does.
Amazing. So the inward out transformation versus the behavior. The behavior just focuses
100%.
on not the root cause, and just putting a band-aid on the wound versus, figuring out where the
Absolutely.
wound came from, and healing it up. So you end up going to like strip clubs after strip clubs with and you're getting like phone call admission parent, like your parents are calling you in. It's like, my daughter is here. Go talk to them, or how does that work?
A lot, LA, right? So a lot of women, a lot of girls, 18, 19 years old, came to LA to act.
Okay.
And then they didn't get their job. They didn't go how they thought. And they started working in clubs, or they started doing porn, or they started doing something else. And their family's really concerned. And then here's this group of Christians that are going into the places that Christians don't go into. And we're really the only resource. We're the only phone call for these parents. A lot of these Christian homes, a lot of these girls that went into the industry came from Christian homes. And they just went sideways.
And so is it a current ministry right now? Is it the name?
So we started first as a ministry in the church, and then so after Glamour Magazine, then the Tyra Banks show, when the Tyra Banks show was going on, had the founder on, and then that got a lot more attention, and we became a nonprofit, and it's still going today.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Any some success stories, or any interesting stories? I'm sure there's hundreds, but
it's so different from the
it's
beginning.
like your new norm. So you think it's like, all right, just I'm doing ministry, but I think like for most listeners, like each story is going to be like, all right, please tell me.
It's so different, right? Because I had such a wonderful childhood that I remember. I think of this one girl named Chrissy. She was in porn, so that's kind of how she got famous. And we met, I think it was in Sherman Oaks. So we're sitting in the office of, the organization, and she's kind of sitting over there and I'm kind of sitting over here doing, some stuff. I was helping with admin, and we would just get to talking, and I would ask her basic questions like, so you were like naked in front of a bunch of people? Yeah. Like, she did porn, like, of course. But I'm trying to imagine, I can't imagine ever doing that.
Right.
And she would come back with questions like, so your parents are still married? Yeah. And she would say, I don't know anyone whose parents are married.
Wow.
So we couldn't be any more different. It was like I was a unicorn to her. She was a unicorn to me. And that was really healing, because they needed someone who didn't know the basic, like some girls in the industry, they're going to assume that you know how things went, or they're going to assume certain things. I don't have anything. You can't assume with me. You have to ask me. You have to tell me.
Right.
And so it was really, you had to dig deep. And I had to dig deep too. Like, how did you do that?
Right.
Why did you do that? And the why, I never chose to do that. But the why to me makes sense. It made sense.
For them to go into those professions?
Yes, it did. And I don't agree with it. I help women, get out of those circumstances. But absent father, I call it the recipe. An absent father, and that could be physically not around, or dad was a pastor and just was really focused on church and not her.
Wow.
Or and sexual abuse at a young age. All of the girls, in my experience, all of the girls that I've met, those two things.
Like a common.
It's the recipe. Yeah. And so here I am without that story, and I'm hearing them say, okay, I was at a neighbor's pool when I was 4, and this happened, and it broke my heart. It broke my heart that these sorts of things happened throughout their childhood. And so by the time they were 18, they were going to take their power back. You hear that a million times. And for them, that's the only card they knew how to play. So do I agree with it? No, but I understood it,
Yeah. So it was broken homes in the sense of like, I was violated. Therefore I want to take ownership, and I'm going to just take ownership over my body and
Yeah.
and engage in
Yeah.
striptease and porn and all those behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. And step number one for these women was on the road to recovery was realizing that you were victimized, but you are not a victim. Because if someone has victim mentality, you're just going to go around the merry-go-round forever, whatever that is. And for these women, in order for them to heal, you have to recognize what happened to them, that was wrong, should not have happened, is not your fault. And you are not a victim.
Right. It's weird to say that to someone who's a victim because you think it's like counterintuitive, but it's victimhood is just the other side of the sin of pride. The attention is on you and what happened. Woe is me, woe is me. And the reality is God loves you. Let that love realize who your true identity is, which is you're a child of God first and foremost. You're not a victim.
Right.
Bad things did happen to you, but knowing your identity in Christ, that frees you to get off that victim loop. And I think, I mean, these are extreme cases of victimhood, and there's no sugarcoating how evil this is. When a child gets abused, it's evil. Like it's as evil as it gets. But I feel like there's this victim mindset on lesser issues in the culture, and I feel like if we just break this "woe is me" mindset, call sin for what it is. I've been sinned against, but I'm not. This doesn't shape my identity. I really do think that leads to a lot of freedom. So you're but you tell me. I'm not the expert on this.
Total
but
freedom. One of the most impactful experiences I've ever had has been in a room full of women coming out of the sex industry, whether it's strip clubs, Hollywood dominatrix clubs, porn, prostitution, you name it, in a room talking about what they experienced, forgiving the people who did that to them,
wow.
concluding that they are not a victim, and encouraging everyone else to do the same. It's incredible. It's counterculture. It's counterintuitive.
Right.
We're going to forgive them. We're going to bless them. We're going to pray for them.
But it's the power of God.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, all right. So let's just go through this case study. So the first step is to just break the victim mindset. What do you do afterwards? You help them walk through the steps of forgiving the people who victimized them?
Yeah, there's a lot of care that goes into it. And from my experience, and everyone's different, from my experience, for about every year that a girl was in the industry, whatever part of the industry that is, they need about a year of counseling.
Yeah.
Because it's deep. It's a lifetime that got them to this place, and there's a lot of unlearning and a lot of healing that needs to happen. It doesn't happen quickly. There's a depth there that it needs to be slow. It needs to be slow and thorough. And I've seen that. I've seen that. This has probably been 15, 20 years now. And I've seen it's not fast. The healing is not fast. And I think a lot of, growing up in Christian culture, you want someone to raise their hand, say they're going to give their life to the Lord, and we're going to count them, and then we're done with that person. These ladies, they need time. They need a lot of time, and it's so worth it.
Right.
And it's so worth it.
And it's discipleship too, at the end of the day. It's just an extreme case of what everyone really needs. But I can't imagine. I'm not going to act like I know what it's like to not, because I had a similar upbringing too. I had the good Christian home. It's like a different world, everything I'm just trying to ask about. So I think that's the other thing too, when people be like, oh yeah, I know what that's like. No, you don't. Like, you have no idea what it's like.
Not at all.
You have no idea what it's like being a child who's sex trafficked in Cambodia. Like, it's another planet, and it's evil. I know it's evil, but I know God is stronger than the evil. So how do you create the relationships with the people you're reaching out to? Like, I feel like that's fascinating. Do you just go into strip clubs, no problem?
I know. I never, before I started doing this, and I don't go into strip clubs all the time now. I'll share a little bit about Chrissy, the girl that I was telling you about earlier. But when we were going in, we would dress up, right? We're all in our early 20s. We'd, makeup, heels, hair, and go into the club. We'd have these pink gift bags with little something in, from the earrings, lip gloss, just a little gift. And we'd walk in, and the door guys would let us in. I'm thinking, if I own this place, I don't know if I'd let these girls in, but okay. And we would just walk around, and I would just walk up to the ladies as they're working, on stage, doing whatever they're doing in the back room. And I would just, here you go. And they wanted that, whatever that was, they wanted that. They would stop what they were doing, look me in the eyes and say, thank you.
Wow.
And we would cultivate relationships with them. We'd be back at the club, in a couple months or whatnot. We'd rotate through LA County, so the Valley, downtown, the West Side. We'd go down to Orange County as well. And then about once a year, we'd go to Vegas And we'd hit about 50 places in one night. That was kind of like the marathon night. But we'd cultivate relationships. And of course, in the moment, nobody says they don't like this or they don't want to. And when you know that they don't want to, and you just cultivate relationship with them, in a year or so, they're going to call you and say, I never wanted to do that. I just wasn't ready.
Right.
I'm ready now. You're the only ones that I know of.
So just being a friend, no agenda, just showing support. So like your friend came out of the lifestyle. So there's that sense of I could also get out of the lifestyle. And then there's also you who's modeling, no, you don't have to end up this way.
Totally.
You made a tag team duo of it's cool because like ministry too, when you look at the Bible, it's Jesus sends people 2 by 2. So you never went solo, or did you go solo sometimes?
No, we wouldn't. Okay. So in the clubs, although we would drive around in a van, and I was sometimes the bus driver, and we'd park outside or park a little bit a ways, but 2 of us would go in and give gifts and have our business card in there. And then that weekend, our website stats would skyrocket because all the girls were trying to check out who are these girls who just came in and kind of seemed normal. And I remember this one, and I feel so bad. And thankfully, I don't know who this ministry was, but we were going into this strip club that we had always gone to and always gotten in. And there was a group of girls out front, and they had this 15-foot big wooden cross. And they're standing out in front of a strip club. And we're like, hi. We walk past them. We go right in. And we do our thing. And the manager's saying, hey, I know you guys have a lot of clubs tonight. Take some bottles of water. Come back on Sunday for brunch. I mean, we had a really good relationship with a lot of these club owners and bouncers and whatnot. And so we're coming out, and this girl says, how did you guys get in? We could never get in. And I looked at her cross, and I said, sweetie, you got to ditch that old rugged cross.
Yeah.
I think of the song, right? The old rugged cross. And that just came out, but it didn't translate.
It's fascinating because the cross is like a Roman crucifixion thing. And the fact that like that alone is weird if you don't understand the history of the Roman Empire. Now you're like, yeah. So, I'm sure in this type of ministry, the Pharisaical mindset has been kind of how big of a roadblock? How much condemnation have you got from the home team?
We have triggered everybody. Even when I first started doing this, I would get phone calls from Christians that knew me growing up and saying, Emily, you are too good for this. What are you doing going into strip clubs? I was like, well, they're really not that different. They're about my age, kind of different experiences, but yeah, I just want them to know that Jesus loves them. So I'm going to go in there. And I got a lot of pushback immediately. I got a lot of pushback when I would go to Vegas, because we would go to, what do they call them? Those sex conventions or whatever the names are that they call them. And we would get a booth, and it would say, Jesus loves porn stars. And so we would go and, I'll take a shift and volunteer, and people would come up to us. Is this a joke? Is this real? Oh no, here we have our Bibles for Jesus loves porn star. And we would have legit conversations. And there were so many people at those porn conventions in Vegas that were pastors' kids or a group in the church.
Why do you think pastors' kids is a common story? Because I, as a pastor with kids, this is like, and the stereotypes of pastors' kids, is it, what are your thoughts on that?
Of all the groups of people that I thought I would meet doing ministry to women in the sex industry, I will tell you that daughters of pastors was never on my radar.
Wow.
Never. But it was so consistent that it left an impression on me. I'm not a pastor's kid, so I don't know what that's like. But from what I've heard, the focus, the attention was on the church, was on the ministry, and it wasn't on her.
Yeah. So it was more like the neglect piece, going back to the second thing, the absent father, but in maybe these cases, more of an altruistic version of that.
Mm-hmm.
The priority.
Dad was one way at home, but then when he got to church, he acted real nice and good.
That's the hypocrisy. Yeah, it's interesting. There's this crazy book called When Narcissism Comes to Church, and this epidemic of narcissistic tendencies in pastors, which is very humbling. And then you have all the scandals of pastors too. They come from sexual brokenness. Maybe they're passing some of that down. And then there's, the evil within the church that no one wants to talk about. Yeah. I think like it's easy to talk about these extreme samples, but what about the hidden ones within the church? And they're getting exposed now.
They are.
But they've always been happening, right?
No. I can think 15 years ago, right, when I first started doing this, They're meet Chrissy. She's the ex-porn star, and she shares her testimony openly now. And we had to have a chat about certain things that she would share with me and that I would promise to never share.
Yeah.
Because it was about guys in ministry, and they're still in ministry.
Right.
And that made my skin crawl. Because here this ex-porn star is, and everyone thinks, oh, ex-porn star, and everyone thinks these guys are decent, and they have no idea.
Yeah, they look.
I've learned so much about pastors and guys in ministry from girls in the sex industry who have personal stories.
That's so heartbreaking. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason why the church has been in decline too. If the leadership is targeted or you have the wrong people in leadership, then you're in trouble, especially when you look at the requirements for church leadership. It's all about character. But we look at charisma, we look at other metrics of success, and they might be good leaders, but if they don't have that sorted out, it's going to just be a recipe of disaster. Yeah. And then usually if they do one thing wrong, they're going to keep doing it. Yeah. It's not like, oh, whoops, I did it one time. It becomes a habitual pattern of darkness and secrets. And I think what you're doing is great because it's interesting because I'm sure like as you're delving into this world, right, you started with seeing this at a cafe in Asia to seeing the darkness in Hollywood to Vegas and then seeing the darkness within the church. Does it get darker? I mean, like right now the news is Puff Daddy, Epstein Island is like how I'm sure you have stories you can't share, but
oh my gosh,
but it's dark.
It is dark. It is dark, but it doesn't take much light in the darkness to make a difference.
Okay.
I think of my friend Chrissy. So she was the girl that was in the office. We're just sitting together, and she couldn't believe that my parents were married. So she asked me if I would be her business manager because she keeps getting all these media requests, TV, documentaries, you name it. And I said, my family's in manufacturing. We manufacture toilet paper tubes. So I said, Chrissy, I make toilet paper tubes. I literally glue paper. I have no idea how to be a business manager for an ex-porn star. No clue at all. And she said, well, I don't trust anyone besides you. And you're businessy. That was her phrase. You're businessy. You're businessy. Can't you figure it out? I thought, Okay, so we started doing it. And I just started making stuff up because she had been so exploited that whatever I did was going to be better. Right? Okay, if she's going to go share her story, okay, here's what we need. And really care for her and really honor her story, who she is, what the Lord's done in her life. And we've been doing that ever since. We've traveled all around the country. We've traveled so many places where she gets to share her story. And now with, platforms like OnlyFans or whatnot, where you get these 18-year-old girls, doing this, she gets to share her story.
Right.
Almost, she's like a mom age now, and she is mom age. And it's unique because not a lot of women are sharing their story like that or that platform. We were contacted by Playboy, and I thought, you must have the wrong number because she is out of the industry. She's been out for a while now. So she does not do this anymore. And they said, yeah, we understand that. That's okay. That's okay. We just think it's really interesting that she used to be in the industry and all of her fans still like her, but now she's a Christian and the church really likes her too. We think that's interesting that everyone still likes her. Okay, so Playboy.com did an article on her giving her life to the Lord. So it's like, you never know what the Lord wants to do.
Right. You have to keep
what platform he wants to use.
But it's interesting you talk about the character of being trustworthy. She valued that in you more than your business savviness, even though you learned along the way and you were able to pull it off because you're trustworthy too, the work ethic and the trust. And then you taking that same philosophy of the company or the ministry. We just need to earn trust. We don't need to be having a giant cross, condemning people and throwing stones. And I think the beautiful thing about Jesus's ministry, like when you get criticized for doing ministry like Jesus, you're doing the right thing. He ate with sinners and tax collectors, and the Pharisees got upset that he was eating with the wrong crowd or being with the wrong crowd. And just the craziest story for me is when there's the prostitute woman who goes to a Pharisee's home, right? Your shorty breaks his taboo, breaks a bottle of expensive perfume, wipes Jesus's feet with it and with her hair. And it's just like Jesus has this integrity to like
be who he is, showing compassion, yet and still also like exposing the uncomfortableness that the religious crowd has when it comes to certain individuals or people. But that's who Jesus is. And if we can't be that, we can't be effective. We can't be a culture that exposes the hypocrisy in the church, the Pharisaical mindset, and also can't reach the lost, because that's what they're God's children. They're lost. It's like the prodigal son.
Absolutely.
And that whole prodigal son parable is told in the context of the Pharisees being upset at Jesus for eating with sinners and tax collectors. And he goes, let me tell you a story. And he ends up telling 3 stories of lostness, foundness. Someone who is dead now is alive. And that's the heart of God. That's the heartbeat of God. And it's amazing ministry, and it's exciting ministry, but it's sad when the church could give some pushback. But at the same time, every life that's found, every person who changes, it's just, I'm sure it's super rewarding, unspeakable rewarding.
Always worth it. I think of a story. This is 2 weeks ago. So I live down in Orange County, California, and attend church down there. I'm on the prayer team down there at that church. And after service, go forward just at the altar if anyone needs prayer. So I'm up there, and I hear Emily, and I look, and it doesn't usually happen, right? Yeah. And I look, and it's a friend of mine who we started doing outreach together. It's 15 years ago. Well, we used to do all the strip clubs. Well, now she lives up in Burbank. Doesn't live in that area. And I see that she's with someone, and immediately I knew this is a girl who's in the industry, and she's with her. She drove down from Burbank to go to this church because this must be close to where this girl lives. And now she just happens to be my church. So I know exactly what's happening without even seeing anything. And so, pray for everyone. Then afterwards they come up, and sure enough, this friend of mine who I've been doing ministry with for 15 years has been building a relationship with this girl. She was a stripper for about 10 years. 10 years.
Wow.
10 years. Just building this relationship. And she's finally ready to come to church. And so she drove down, and she walks into a church in Orange County, and she sees me. And so we're talking, and just, talking about some resources and whatnot and all that. And she excused herself. She had to, go outside. And so it's me and my friend. And I'm thinking, what do we have here? I don't know. What do we have? So I look over, and there's a woman who she's on staff there. And I said, she does not know my story. A lot of my Orange County friends don't know all the details of what I do. And so I said, this is a friend of mine. We do ministry to girls in the sex industry. Do you know of anyone here at the church? And she looks at me, and her eyes just pink ball. And she said, that's my story. I used to be a stripper, and now I'm on staff here. And it just, like, you never know.
Right.
You never know. And so we were able to have this conversation on, get the resources that she needs. But it's a slow process.
Yeah, I think that's always important, because I think this, like, raise your hand Christianity, I mean, it has value, don't get me wrong, like to be in for Jesus, but like that 10 years of patience and prayer and trust, withholding judgment, just showing love is huge. What about the financial aspect of this? So some people, like, this is their livelihood. How do you help people in the industry when this is their livelihood to get out? Because it's not just, the moral aspect. There's the pragmatic, I need to pay bills and eat food.
Yeah.
Do you coach them to get new type of work? Or
that's challenging. That it's challenging for all of them, because they're making a lot of easy, fast money.
Yeah.
Like, you can go to Vegas and escort and make rent, make your bills. You can do all that in one weekend and you're good. And so when they decide to walk away from that, economically, there's zero income. I used to work on resumes, and I would help, like, what synonym can we use for sales?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would, because they did have skills. They had skills. So I'm trying to, what can we call it? Can we call it something else? But that's a hard thing. I still don't have a solution. There are more ministries now. When we first started doing this, no one was talking about this. Yeah. No one was talking about this. And now, with there being more ministries, there's more financial support. So if a girl, when she's ready to leave the industry, someone might support her and help her with rent, or help with groceries, or childcare, or things like that. There's more resources usually from those faith-based nonprofits.
That's great.
But it's a struggle.
But that's one of the biggest pain points then.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when Chrissy left the industry, her story, so she was on set, she was dating this guy who was a stuntman here in Hollywood, and some guy on set came up to her and said, "Hey, I know who you are and I know what you do." Because she was real undercover. She never talked about it, never anything. And she's like, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" And anyhow, he said, I know that you do porn, and I want you to know that Jesus created you for a reason, and porn is not it." And she said for the first time, someone had placed value and purpose on her life. For the first time. This is some guy she's never even met before. They're on set of a normal movie, regular movie. And that's all that guy said. That's literally all he said. So he said, "Do you want to step outside and pray?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And they stepped outside and they prayed. She received the Lord, and she never went back into the industry.
Amazing.
She never accepted another dollar. The checks that were coming in, the money was coming in, never cashed it. Cold turkey.
Yeah, that's an amazing boldness for someone to just come up and say those things. But I feel like that's the problem with the church. We're not bold enough to
absolutely
just share, or speak
she was ready. She was ready. She was praying to God. She was depressed. She was in a bad place, and she's asking God, "God, if you see me, if you love me, send somebody. I don't even know normal people.
Yeah.
Send somebody." And here this guy is just kind of embarrassed because he's a bit goofy, and she gives her life to the Lord because of what he said.
Amazing. So her prayer was answered. He was being bold, listening to God. And I feel like that's how the church works. I mean, prayers get answered by the other church members, and that's a beautiful, beautiful story. So how has your ministry pivoted or changed? You mentioned OnlyFans, and like kind of you don't need to go through the clubs or the directors anymore. You go straight to consumer. How do you evangelize over the internet? I'm curious.
I'm definitely a behind the scenes person more now than ever. Yeah. So that ministry that still exists, there's a lot of ministries now that actually go into the clubs. I started working with Chrissy and really focused on her because the amount of requests that she gets, the media requests.
Yeah.
She's at university. She's busy. So, but because people, somehow, she's been out of the industry for 15 years, but a lot of people still know her. And so they'll contact her through her socials, through her website or whatnot, and we'll process that. And depending on what resources the girls need, we'll get them that. Or sometimes it's her on the phone with these girls and just having a conversation. I know what that's like. I've been there. I understand that. And we don't work with guys. So if guys need to speak with someone, we'll refer them to a men's organization. So we don't minister to men. But that's, a lot of it is Chrissy sharing her story, making herself available.
So people just reaching out. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. What would you say to the consumers, to the guys because it's always supply and demand. So I feel like if that's taken care of, the demand will be less, and the incentive to engage in, that behavior would slowly fizzle out. But it seems like it's not happening. Is it?
I know. I think I'm torn. I think I'm one and the other, or both, or on one hand, I'm so sympathetic. I can't imagine what it's like for young men.
Yeah.
Where at a young age you have an iPhone in your hand, and you Google whatever words you want, and you see things that you never thought you should see, that you should never see it, at a young age. And little by little, we've met kids that are addicted to porn, 10, 11 years old, 12 years old, addicted.
Yeah.
At night under the covers with their phone, just addiction, right? So it's like when you're 20 years old, this is what you've been doing half your life. Right. So on that hand, I'm very sympathetic. Makes me upset with a lot of parents that not monitoring that. And then for the older guys, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. It breaks my heart. It's in the church. Like when I'm sitting in a room full of pastors, it breaks my heart there because I know the stats.
Right.
Right? Pastors' conferences, the stats in hotel rooms, like they're all buying porn. Like, I know these stats. I don't have a solution. It breaks my heart, though. It must break the Lord's heart. I can't imagine how it breaks the Lord's heart.
Right. And I think maybe that's where it starts, right? Knowing that we're breaking God's heart and being convicted by that, and then realizing that we're victimizing people directly. Because there's an indirect nature to that. There's the obvious, perpetrator, but the indirect consumption of it It leads to
Yeah.
the supply and demand, and it's tough with the internet now.
I'm cold turkey. I think unplug it all, delete all the apps, share your passwords with everyone, get all the blockers, get everything. But then even with those resources, so many don't want to.
Right.
With any addiction though, right? With drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be anything. You could do all these things, but you really don't want to. And that's, I think, the heart of it. I think that's the core of it.
Yeah.
What do you do when someone really don't want to?
Yeah. You can't walk people through behavioral change if they don't want it. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for being so open and for your ministry. But if there would be one thing you wanted to tell the church, what would it be?
Read the Bible every day.
Let's get in the word.
Read the Bible every day. See what he has for you. It is alive. The Lord is alive. His word is alive. See what he has for you.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for everything you're doing for the kingdom and for being so trustworthy and brave. And thank you, everyone, for listening to the Christ and Coffee podcast. Remember to stay caffeinated, my friends, and see you next week. God bless you.